What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Wednesday, September 22nd.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, we have a 10-game slate tonight. So let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Zach Wheeler pitching against a low-salary batting team, the Baltimore Orioles. Zach Wheeler, he's only giving up a .617 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 7 righties here tonight. On top of that, the Orioles have only hit 6 of his last 26 pitches. That's a .231 batting average, and Zach Wheeler is $10,700 FanDuel salary, $300 less on DraftKings, projected at 30.6 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 35 fantasy points or more in this one. He has an ERA of 2.83. His record is 14-9 on the season, pitching an average of 97 pitches per game, averaging 41 fantasy points per game. He scored 36, 51, and 55 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Zach Wheeler here versus the Baltimore Orioles. Okay, now this is a super high risk, high reward pitcher. Take a look at Joe Ryan, pitching against a low salary batting team, the Chicago Cubs. Joe Ryan, he's only giving up a .493 OPS versus righties. He's facing 5 righties here tonight. The Cubs have hit 2 of his last 11 pitches. That sample size is too small, but it's a good start. And he's $7,700 FanDuel salary and 500 more on DraftKings. Projected at 22.3 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 30 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 27, 43, and 21 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So he has an ERA of 2.12, record is 1-1, and pitching an average of 80 pitches per game. So the thing with this pick is he's got to get to the 7th inning so he can rack up 30 to 40 fantasy points. Then he would crush value here. So it's a high risk, high reward pick, but I like Joe Ryan here versus the Chicago Cubs. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like JT Realmuto with a 26% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Keegan Aiken. JT Realmuto is batting 15% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .904 OPS versus lefties, and Keegan Aiken, he throws 11% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .819 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Aiken yet, and JT Realmuto is $3,300 FanDuel salary, $1,500 more on DraftKings, projected at 11.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 34, 3, and 10 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like JT Realmuto here versus Keegan Aiken.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
I also like Jared Walsh with a 97% batting advantage over Luis Garcia. Jared Walsh is batting 34% better versus righty pitchers, batting a 1.017 OPS versus righties. And Luis Garcia, he pitches his worst ball by far to lefty batters, 62% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.016 OPS versus lefties. I like this pick because Jared Walsh is 6 for 9, batting a 667 batting average and a 2.270 OPS versus Garcia. 2 of those hits were for home runs. Then he's got 2 doubles in there. So Jared Walsh is $2,900 FanDuel salary, $1,100 more on DraftKings, projected at 14.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 0, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Jared Walsh here versus Luis Garcia. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Tommy Edman with a 40% batting advantage over Brett Anderson. Tommy Edman is batting 23% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .846 OPS versus lefties, and Brett Anderson throws his worst ball versus switch hitters, 17% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .891 OPS versus switch hitters. And Tommy Edman is 3 for 7 with a .429 batting average and a .858 OPS versus Anderson. He's $3,000 FanDuel salary, $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 10 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 28, 0, and 9 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Tommy Edman here versus Brett Anderson. Okay, here's a value play for you. I like Freddie Galvis with a 31% batting advantage over that low salary pitcher, Keegan Aiken. Freddie Galvis is batting 6% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .757 OPS versus lefties. And Keegan Aiken, he pitches his worst ball versus switch hitters, 25% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.026 OPS versus switch hitters. Now I like this pick because Freddie Galvis is only $2,400 FanDuel salary, $1,200 more on DraftKings, projected at 8.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 0, and 12 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Freddie Galvis here versus Keegan Aiken. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Austin Riley with a 29% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Merrill Kelly. Austin Riley is batting 6% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .816 OPS versus righties. And Merrill Kelly, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 22% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .790 OPS versus righties. So there's no at-bats versus Kelly yet. Austin Riley is $3,400 FanDuel salary, $1,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 22, 32, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Austin Riley here versus Merrill Kelly.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, No headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
I also like Josh Donaldson with a 4% batting advantage over Kyle Hendricks. Josh Donaldson is batting 9% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .837 OPS versus righties, and Kyle Hendricks is giving up a .737 OPS versus righties. Now I like this pick because Josh Donaldson is 3 for 7, batting a .429 batting average and a .985 OPS versus Hendricks. He's $3,200 FanDuel salary, $1,100 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season, and he's been on fire, scoring 28, 9, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Josh Donaldson here versus Kyle Hendricks. Okay, let's take a look at the shortstop position. I like Dansby Swanson with a 43% batting advantage over that low salary pitcher, Merrill Kelly. Dansby Swanson is batting 21% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .812 OPS versus righties, and Merrill Kelly, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 22% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .790 OPS versus righties. So Dansby Swansby is 0 for 3 versus Kelly, but the splits are good here, and he's only $2,900 FanDuel salary, $1,100 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 10, 3, and 0 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Dansby Swanson here versus Merrill Kelly. Now here's a value play. I like J.P. Crawford with a 13% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Cole Irving. J.P. Crawford is batting a .682 OPS versus lefties, and Cole Irving, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 14% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.274 OPS versus lefties. So I like this pick because J.P. Crawford is 5 for 8 with a .625 batting average and a 1.375 OPS versus Irving. He's only $2,700 FanDuel salary. He's $1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 13.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 31, 12, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like J.P. Crawford here versus Cole Irving. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. My home run hitter, dong of the day, I like Mookie Betts with a 22% batting advantage over German Marquez. Mookie Betts bats 28% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .969 OPS versus righties, and German Marquez gives up a .641 OPS versus righties. Now I like this pick because Mookie Betts is 5 for 9 with a .556 batting average and a 1.156 OPS versus Marquez. Now those 5 hits were singles, so I think he knocks one out of the park here tonight. And Mookie Betts is $4,100 FanDuel salary, $1,900 more on DraftKings, projected at 14 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 7, 12, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 11 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Mookie Betts here versus German Marquez. I also like Lamont Wade Jr. with a 77% batting advantage over Vince Vasquez. Lamont Wade Jr. is batting 57% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .808 OPS versus righties, and Vince Vasquez, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 20% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .950 OPS versus lefties. Lamont Wade Jr. is 2 for 3, batting a .667 and a 2.334 OPS versus Vasquez. He's $2,900 FanDuel salary, $1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 10, 6, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Lamont Wade Jr. here versus Vince Vasquez.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.